What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and in this video we're going to be covering a pretty interesting format, which is PGD format. Now, if you've been following my coverage of Yada format, then this shouldn't be too new to you, as PGD format is basically Yada format, but, using the July 2003 limited list instead of the August one. And this means that the cards from Pharaonic Guardian are unlimited on release, so you can play with things like 3 Ring of Destruction, 3 Mirage of Nightmare, etc. Also, the July 2003 limited list has Graceful Charity at 2 copies, so that's kind of wild. Although I actually forgot to include it at 2 copies in this list because I've been playing with Graceful at 1 copy for so long since we've been in Yada for quite some time. So that's a major deck building flaw on my part here. But if you want to build decks in this format, then you should definitely play 2 Graceful, as Graceful is just a nuts card. But I still think this deck is pretty good, and it shows a pretty good proof of concept with what a popular deck in the format might be, and that is just going all in on Ring of Destruction for a burn strat, using it in conjunction with Lava Golem and Barrel Behind the Door. Now, this is something you could potentially do in Yada, but with only 1 Ring of Destruction becomes a lot less good, because Barrel becomes a lot more of a brick. As Barrel Behind the Door is a very narrow counter trap that says activate only when a card effect is activated that would inflict damage to you, and your opponent takes the damage instead. So this can be used on something like Ring to have your opponent take basically double the attack of whatever monster you destroy with it. So if you combine it with Lava Golem, you can get in 6,000 damage, which is really nice. However, Barrel is really, really narrow. You also can't use Barrel Behind the Door on an opponent's Barrel Behind the Door. So in this format, this strategy might not actually be that good because, with 3 Ring of Destruction, people might be playing Barrel Behind the Door, at least in the side deck for sure. So if your opponent sees that you're on this sort of all-in ring barrel strategy, then they can side in barrels of their own and sort of burn you to death instead of you burning them to death. But I still think that this is pretty much the deck that is most different in PGD format versus Yada format. So I figured this is the deck that I should show off on the channel here. I do think that it made for some pretty interesting gameplay, and it really did show some of the major differences between this format and Yada format. So let's just quickly go through the card by card. We've got a Cannon Soldier, Great Burn card in this deck. It can also be searched out off of Mystic Tomatoes, Sangand, and Witch. The Mystic Tomatoes can also go into Spirit Reaper, which is a great stall tool in this format, although with triple Ring, it becomes a bit less good, as Ring is target removal, and that will destroy Spirit Reaper. We've also got a Sinister Serpent here to search off Sangan or Witch. This can also help us stall. It also pairs well with Magic Damage, which we are playing 3 of in the deck, because this is good at stopping our opponent's spell and trap removal, which could be disastrous for things like Gravity Bind or Nightmare Wheel. Also, Barrel Behind the Door plus Ring of Destruction is a 2-card combo, so we likely will be setting a fair amount of back row, and if our opponent has a Harpies for that, with no good monster to ring and barrel on field, then a Magic Jammer could be used there as well. And lastly, for the monster, we've got triple Lava Golem. This is great removal, and also, if you do manage to pull off the Lava Golem, Ring of Destruction, Barrel Behind the Door play, it can be very, very devastating for your opponent. For the spells, we've got Confiscation, Dark Hole, Graceful Charity, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, Triple Scapegoat, a great stall tool in this deck, and a Forceful Sentry. So we're kind of spell light, but a lot of the spells that we're lacking just don't really help out our game plan as much. And Delinquent Duo, it costs us life points, and also it's not targeted removal. And in this sort of deck, you kind of just want to get rid of your opponent's answers to your stuff. You don't really care about just being up in card advantage. So that's why we're only playing the hand rips here that give us actual hand knowledge and give us a choice of what to discard. Now, you notice there are no Mirages here. The reason we don't have Mirages is because we're not actually playing MSTs, and without MSTs, the Mirages are a bit worse. But in other decks in this format, you might see 1 Mirage or multiple Mirage, as you can draw a Mirage off a Mirage and then, MST your first Mirage and then play the other. So there's sort of neat things you can do with Mirage, although that uses up a lot of MSTs really quickly. So I'm not really sure if it's too optimal to play multiple Mirage or not. I mean, we may find out in some of the games that we see here today. But that's it for the spells for this deck. For the traps, we've got triple Barrel Behind the Door to pair with our triple Ring of Destruction. We've got triple Gravity Bind. This could be a good just Floodgate, and your opponent has to use spell and trap removal on it if they want to clear it. So this could lock down the game, and if you set up something like a Lava Golem play, it can be very, very devastating for your opponent. We've got an Imperial Order, incredibly powerful card in this format, just like within Yada. We've got a Magic Cylinder to deal a bit more burn damage. We've got triple Magic Jammer, triple Nightmare Wheel. Nightmare Wheel is a really great not like quite Floodgate, but it is a stalling card, preventing your opponent from actually being able to attack with certain monsters. And it also does deal some burn damage as well. And for the side deck, I think the side deck's really rough, but it's basically the side deck that I used for my previous build in Yada. So we got triple Torrential Tribute. We've got Fake Traps in the side now. This can be good to bring in potentially in game 2. If your opponent is going to bring in more spell and trap removal, this can really be annoying for them to deal with. We've also got triple Prohibition. This can be good to bring in against certain strategies that really do depend on a specific card. It can also just be good at stopping your opponent's outs. Like, for instance, if you Prohibition calling Mystical Space Typhoon, that can be pretty decent. Also got triple Messenger of Peace. I really don't like this card. I think, honestly, this is a good candidate just for removal entirely, as I just don't think it's very good, and also does burn you, which can come up. 100 life points isn't really that much, but oftentimes in this game, you are pretty far behind on life points, especially with triple Ring of Destruction in the format. Even with the triple barrel behind the doors, you don't necessarily want to fire these right away. So, that burn cost might actually come up and could be pretty devastating. Same with Dark Snake Syndrome. Dark Snake Syndrome is in case we want to get a bit more aggressive, but we really do need time to draw into our Ring Barrel combo, and Dark Snake Syndrome doesn't quite give us that time. So I think I'd probably cut this in the future. Fusion deck is just sort of a fusion toolbox here. Not really likely that we'll ever go into this, but, potentially could come up. But that's going to do it for the deck here. And I think that this deck is pretty neat. Like, again, as I mentioned before, I don't really think it's the best because I do think there are a lot of things that your opponent can do to disrupt this. And if they are playing barrels of their own, then you're in for a really rough time here. But I do think it's a neat sort of idea, and this is something that is kind of unique to PGD format, given that there are 3 ring here, and there aren't ever really 3 ring of destruction at full power like this ever again. So let's dive into the games and see how this match goes. Okay, we've got a game against Soul65, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We are playing the burn deck. Let's see how it goes for us. Well, that's not a very good start. We want to go first to be able to set up our stuff. But I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. It could build up their field a bit for a Lava Golem. Ooh, okay, this is a really good hand for us here. They're just going to set 3, pass back to us. And, I mean, let's just start off with a Pot of Greed. Oh, they're thinking. That's not good. Yep, Imperial Order comes down. Yeah, we're in the no fun zone now. We've got an Imperial Order of our own, though, so we can't really complain too much about this. We're just going to set a Tomato, set IO, set Ring, and set Barrel. So the reason we do this is, they'd have to have like a Harpies to clear our entire back row. We've got Imperial Order in case they do have the Harpies. If they then have an MST, then, we just got outplayed. But we do have our Mystic Tomato set here to get another monster to build board presence, and we also have a Dark Hole in worst case scenario. So, and in order to clear our back row, they need to let the IO lapse anyways. So, the Dark Hole will be live if IO falls. So I think that this is ultimately pretty okay here. Although there are things that do beat this play, so it could be a bit greedy. But I think it's good just getting the barrel ring play set up in a worst case scenario. Opponent's going to flip up a Don Salug here and set 2 and attack in. They must have the read that this is potentially a Don Salug of our own. Luckily for us, it's just a Tomato. So we'll get out another Tomato. This will be able to clear their Salug next turn, potentially. And they're going to pass back to us. We draw a Sinister Serpent, which is pretty nice. We're just going to attack into the Zalug. They've got Ring for our Tomato, and we could actually barrel here if we wanted to. However, I want to save barrel for a point where our opponent is low enough because they are sitting on this IO and keeping it alive. So if they keep paying for the IO, we could potentially wind up in a situation where our opponent does have low enough life points to go for the Ring barrel play. Although this is a bit risky in case they are main decking a barrel of their own. But given they've got Zalug on field, we're just going to set the Sinister Serpent and Dark Hole here, so that way we don't lose any cards from hand. Opponent's going to pay the 700 to keep the IO up. They're going to flip up a Gearfried here, and they're going to attack into our set. It is a Sinister Serpent, so we'll just be able to get that back next turn. Opponent's going to attack in 14 and choose not to mill, probably correct. and they're going to pass back to us. We draw Magic Jammer, which is pretty decent with a Serpent. Unfortunately, we can't activate it yet, and IO prevents spell cards from really resolving either way, so it doesn't really matter that much, but it's good for later. Opponent's going to pay another 7, and they're actually getting pretty close to the point where we can actually kill them with Ring and Barrel on Gearfried. Because with that combo, that would be 3,600 damage, and they've got 4,500 life points, so we could make it happen. They're going to hit in to the Serpent, attack in with Gearfried for 18, and then they're going to pass back to us. We draw Raigeki, which, I mean, that's a card. Not really that useful right now, but we're going to set this Sinister Serpent again. They're going to pay another 7, and they're so close to actually winding up in lethal range there. They're going to hit in with the Gearfried there. And we're in a lot of danger here. So if they do have a way to disrupt our barrel ring play, then we're kind of in trouble, because we could Ring of Destruction on the Gearfried, but then they have a chance to respond. And I think if they chain something else to the ring, we can't then activate Barrel Behind the Door for our ring. So we could just lose the game that way, actually. And given they're on a Gearfried deck, they might have Blast with Chains to chain there. Nightmare Wheel is pretty good, though. This actually might be the end of the game here. We're going to go for a Dark Hole. That will resolve without effect because they've got IO up. And we're going to set a Sinister Serpent, set a Nightmare Wheel, pass back to our opponent. And if all goes well, this might be the end of the game. They are going to think about this, and actually they are going to pay the 7. So in standby phase, after the cost, just in case they've got like a Jinzo that they want to slam down on field, we are going to use Ring on this Gearfried here. And then we're going to chain this Barrel Behind the Door, because it seems like they didn't have a response. And yeah, that was just a torrential tribute, so they couldn't have actually chained anything here to stop this play. Although, yeah, and the Raigeki wouldn't have done anything either. So that is actually going to be the end of the game. So we actually managed to pull this one out by the skin of our teeth, even though we were pretty low in life points, and there was a major risk of us getting disrupted here if that last set was like a Blast with Chain. But luckily, we do manage to take that win in game 1. And going into game 2, Gearfried is a bit tricky to deal with. I think I actually side out of things like Gravity Bind, because Gravity Bind is a bit rough into things like Blast with Chain, which can just, pop it out of nowhere, which is very unfortunate for us. So I feel like the Nightmare Wheels are a bit better in that regard, but because Nightmare Wheels at least do damage. But I don't know. It's a bit tricky to side in this matchup. An aggressive deck like Gearfried definitely does have the advantage, I think. But opponent's just going to start out with a Goblin Attack Force, set 3, activate Mirage, and that's going to be fine by us. So they're going to draw 3 here. Kind of rough. But we're just going to set this Mystic Tomato, set a Scapegoat, set a Barrel, and set a Magic Jammer, pass back to our opponent. Now, the Barrel isn't online yet, but it could be online later, so I figure it's might as well set it. And we've got Jammer in worst case scenario, so I feel like this is ultimately fine. Our opponent is going to go to standby phase, and they're going to chain IO to the Mirage trigger here. Now, I actually make a pretty big misplay, I think. I think I should have fired the Scapegoat here. The issue with doing that is that then if they attack into the Mystic Tomato, then we can't actually summon off it, which would be annoying. But I think it probably would be better just to have a defensive wall here. We do have the Reaper in hand, sure. But they've drawn a lot of cards, so they likely do have a way to out the Reaper, especially if they're playing something like Blast with Chain. And given they're on Gearfried, very likely that there is a Blast with Chain somewhere in their back row or hand. So I think this is a bit risky. I don't think I should have done it in hindsight, but I just let that go through. And they are indeed going to pay for the Imperial Order, and they're going to summon this Exiled Force, popping our set here either way. So we will be taking 2,300 there. So that's a lot of damage. They're going to pass back to us. We draw this Graceful, not really useful under IO. We're going to set this Reaper, pass back to them. Hope they don't have a way to deal with it. But that's not looking too likely. They're going to bring out a Gearfried here. They're going to hit in to our set. It's the Reaper, so that's going to be fine by them. And we draw a Ring of Destruction, which is really nice. We'll be able to use that potentially later. And they are going to pay another 700 here. They're going to switch the Goblin Attack Force to attack in with the Goblin, which means that they do have some way to clear the Reaper here. And unfortunately, they can just activate Blast with Chain in damage step to pop the Reaper. So if we want to actually deal with like the Gearfried and bait out the Blast Chain now, we do actually have to ring right now, which is quite unfortunate for us. As it would have been great if, they used Blast with Chain, we were able to chain ring to it, pop the Gearfried before Blast Chain could actually equip to it. But I think we just have to go for this now. So we will indeed go for the ring on the Gearfried. They're going to ring our Spirit Reaper. So not quite Blast with Chain, but it still hurts a little bit because we do take a fair amount of damage here, dropping down to 1300, which is a really, really dangerous spot to be, especially when they've got IO up and we just keep drawing these spells. Oof. We're going to set a Scapegoat here as a bluff. And they are indeed going to let the Imperial Order lapse, which is very good for us. They're going to fire a painful choice here. Sending 5, and I think with Wang Hu is very scary to see in their deck here, as Wang Hu can shut off our Scapegoats, which is our main way of defending ourselves right now. So I think what we got to give them is the Yada, because we've got Scapegoats, so Yada isn't really that big of a deal right now. It also has one less card that they're drawing off Mirage, so I feel like that's ultimately pretty good as well. They're going to bring out that Yada attack in. We've got this Scapegoat here. So we will be able to bring out 4 goat tokens here. And that's going to be fine with them. They're going to add back that Yada hand, pass back to us. We draw a Witch, which is really nice here. We're going to fire a Graceful Charity now that we can. And this is actually a pretty interesting hand to think about here. We could potentially try and give them a Lava Golem and keep the Cylinder and the Nightmare Wheel as well. That's a lot of damage set up there. So that might actually be the way to go. But if they just keep bringing out Yatagarasu each turn, not committing more than 1 monster to board, the Lava Golem will be pretty dead. And yeah, I feel like it's not worth it to having a dead Lava Golem in hand. So we're actually going to send that. We're also going to send a Magic Cylinder, as I feel like that's a bit too risky. Because, there are multiple ways to play around Magic Cylinder. If they've sided into more spell and trap removal, then that would be really bad for us. It's not chainable. I mean, Nightmare Wheel isn't really the most chainable thing either, but Nightmare Wheel at least locks them down for more turns. So I like Nightmare Wheel a bit better. It also has some more fringe uses as well. So we're going to set the Nightmare Wheel, set the Witch, pass back to them. And then in end phase here, we're going to actually fire this Nightmare Wheel on their set monster. Now, the reason we do this is because this way they won't actually be able to change the battle position of that monster, and I'm worried that because they set it, it means it's a flip effect monster. Otherwise, they could have just attacked into a token with something like Yatagarasu. That's not really that risky of a play, given that, it returns to hand anyways. So we are just going to Nightmare Wheel it preemptively. We draw another Nightmare Wheel, and then before we can actually get the burn off, they are going to MST our Nightmare Wheel. That is perfectly fine by us. We drew another one, so we'll be able to use that. And then in standby phase, we are going to actually fire this Nightmare Wheel here. So that prevents them from actually being able to flip up that flip monster, whatever it is. They're going to flip up this Witch here, and they're going to fire a Torrential Tribute, which will clear the entire board here, which is kind of unfortunate. But we do get a Witch search here, so we will be able to search with the Witch. We're thinking about this for a bit. There are a couple different options, but we are just going to grab this Serpent. We do have Magic Jammer on field, and there are a bunch of potential things that we might want to Magic Jammer. So I think that's ultimately pretty good. We're going to bring out a Scapegoat here to block that Kaiku attack, which I think is a pretty good defensive option here. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. They will be able to draw 2 here off the Mirage Nightmare, which is a bit unfortunate here, but we do have Forceful just to send 1 back. And we will indeed Forceful Sentry, see what they are working with here. They've got Double Blast, Gearfried, and Yada. I think we want to send back the Gearfried, as they can pair Blast with it either way. And we're not really that scared of Yada, given that we've got another Scapegoat in hand in a worst case scenario. So we send back the Gearfried, leaving them with double Blast with Chain and a Yada. There were potential other options as well. We might have just wanted to send back the Yada, as that's a potential threat if they do manage to clear our board. But I think this is ultimately fine. We're going to set a Scapegoat here. Maybe a bit of a greedy play, as if they do have spell and trap removal, then, we'll be forced to Magic Jammer to prevent the Scapegoat from dying. But, yeah, we discard 2 there. We hit a Raigeki, which is really nice. And we don't have to actually Magic Jammer here. They're going to bring out Yatagarasu, attack in to our monsters here. And then they're going to set 1, pass back to us. And that is great. I mean, they draw 3 here. which is unfortunate. But I still feel really good about this, especially because we've got this Reborn to deal with their Kaiku, and we know that their set is a Blast with Chain. So we're going to Reborn this Exiled, pop their Kaiku, and we're going to pass back to them. We do get to discard 3 of their cards, so we're going to allow them to keep those 2. They'll pitch a Witch, a Torrential, and a Reinforcement, which we feel pretty good about. Graceful Charity, though, is a bit unfortunate there. They're going to draw 3 and then pitch 2, including a Yada and a Blast. They're going to go for Reborn here, and I'm going to ask them to target because if they bring out Wanghu, then we actually want to chain Scapegoat to that. We might even want to just Jammer that, but I think we can save Jammer for later. I think just chaining Scapegoat to bring back Wanghu would be best. But they are indeed going to go for the Gearfried to pair with the Blast with Chains. And we're thinking about this. We could potentially Magic Jammer this, and indeed we will. I think that probably is the correct move there. And we draw another Magic Jammer, so we're rewarded for it. They're going to draw 4 off the Mirage there. And we add back the Sinister Serpent. They're running awfully low on cards in deck, so deck out could potentially be an option here. In end phase, they're going to call the Haunted back, this Gearfried here, which is kind of rough because now they've got the Blast with Chain Pop online. And they will indeed just go for a Blast with Chain Pop right now. And they're going to pop. What are they going to pop? They pop our Goat token. Okay, that's perfectly fine. We've got another Scapegoat here. They're going to go for MST, and we're just going to Magic Jammer that because this means that they'll have to discard their entire hand. I think it's worth it to do this because we potentially have them on a clock that just, they deck out, right? Because they have to draw 4 during our standby phase. They draw another on their turn and discard a bunch as well if they don't have the last MST, which, they might have the last MST because they've only used up 2 of them. But I still feel pretty good about that. We still got a Scapegoat. I mean, we'll have to use the Scapegoat here. But I do think that this is probably our best win condition. Just, Magic Jammering the MST and forcing them to discard. And we see that they're actually on double Mirage or Nightmare, maybe triple, depending on what else they've got in deck. But, I'm happy that we managed to discard their entire hand, get rid of a monster. Although it is kind of worrying because they haven't used up a Dark Hole yet, which could be annoying for our Scapegoat play here. But they're going to attack in with Gearfried. We accidentally misclick and reveal the barrel. I mean, barrel wasn't really doing anything here anyways. But we're going to fire that Scapegoat. They're going to hit into one of our tokens here. And they're going to pass back to us. We draw, another barrel. That's really, really rough here. They will be able to draw 4. And we just got to hope the last card in deck is MST. We set the Sinister Serpent, we set a barrel and pass back to them. Nothing else we can really do here. They've got MST for their Mirage, and unfortunately that will go through. They've got Dark Hole as well, so that will clear the entire board here. And they've got a remaining monster, a last Gearfried here to finish off the game. So as you can see in this game, barrel can definitely be a major brick, which is quite unfortunate here. I mean, I think we had a chance to use barrel earlier on our Gearfried ring. So maybe if we had done that, the game would have turned out a bit differently because we'd be at 3,100 life points. They'd be at 2,000. But, we'd have to draw something to protect ourselves here next turn as we were in pretty dire straits. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how it actually would have gone. I think we still probably would have lost this one either way. Although it was a very, very intense game too here. And it shows how good this deck can be at stalling, even in the face of a lot of adversity there. But we are going to go into game 3 here. And I do think I keep the deck sided pretty much the same way that I did for game 2. And this is a really good hand on our part here. And we can fire this Pot of Greed without fear of an Imperial Order this time. So that's very nice. We're just going to set a Tomato, set a Scapegoat here. This might be a little bit of a mistake because, again, just like with last game, if they do have some way to force out the Scapegoat, then we won't be able to summon off the Tomato that they attack into. So maybe we should set the Reaper instead. Oh boy, Wanghu is pretty rough. That also really hurts our Tomato play. Although we can actually do something into this. We can bring out a Sangan. Sangan will get popped, and then we'll get a search off that. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's still kind of rough that they've got Wanghu there. Luckily, we do have Dark Hole and Raigeki to clear that if we want it. We could potentially fire that now just to make our tomato and scapegoat live. But I figure, we're not really at much risk of anything besides taking damage next turn if they bring out another monster and attack in. Because they can't summon out Zalug, given King Tiger Wangyu's effect. They can't summon out Yatagarasu, given its effect. So I'm not really too concerned about anything like hitting into my life points here. So I figure I'll let them get potentially a bit greedy, committing another monster to board. And then I've got Dark Hole to clear the way. We get back the Serpent next turn, and we're feeling pretty good about that. So I figure this is a relatively safe play here. And I figure it could be pretty good at just clearing away more of their monsters. They're going to think about this, bring out a Yatagarasu, but they can't do that because Wanghu does affect both players here. So I'll just let them take it back. I mean, this isn't like a tournament level game. It's just casual play, testing out this kind of neat format here. So they're going to go for a reinforcement in the army, grabbing a gear-free the Iron Knight, and they're going to get in for 1800. Again, there's damage, but that's all it is. They couldn't search out a Zalug and rip a card out of our hand. And now they've got a juicy board to... Oh, okay. That actually makes it a bit more juicy. We contribute over both their monsters for a Lava Golem here. And we do have the Scapegoat to protect ourselves next turn as well. So I'm feeling really good about this. So we're going to bring out that Lava Golem. This will burn them for 1,000 next turn. And we're going to just set a barrel behind the door in case they've got like MST or something. I'm pretty sure we can't actually activate Scapegoat the turn we summon out a Lava Golem, and it still is summoned. So that will indeed prevent Scapegoat from being activated here. So we've set the barrel just as sort of bait in case they've got spell and trap removal. They'll use it on that, not the Scapegoat, hopefully. But it looks like we're fine there. They're going to bring out Yatagarasu now and try and go for the Yatalock. Luckily, we do have this Scapegoat play here. So we will be able to bring out the goat tokens and protect our life points here while forcing them to keep that big Lava Golem on board here. And, they won't actually be able to Yatalock us, which is also very nice. They're going to set another pass back to us. Oh, wow. Okay. That actually could just be the end of the game. That is very interesting here. We add back the Serpent. We should have done that last turn as well. We're going to set the Serpent, set a Dark Hole, set a Ring, and pass back to our opponent. The reason we set Dark Hole and Ring is because if they've got like spell and trap removal in the end phase, we don't want them to snipe the Ring. So we set the Dark Hole as a bit of a bluff there. They could always, get lucky and snipe the Ring instead, which would be kind of rough for us. But I feel like this is better than just setting one and passing back to them. So if they don't have a way to deal with this, then I'm feeling really, really good. They're going to check if that's okay, and they're going to take 1,000, and then after the Lava Golem effect activates, we are going to go for Ring here, targeting the Lava Golem. They are going to signal that's fine, and we've got this barrel behind the door to finish off our opponent here. I think if they had chained Blast with Chain, it actually would have prevented us from using barrel behind the door here, I think. It also would have meant more damage for them, but we would have also taken damage. But we would have pretty much had lethal next turn anyways, because we've got Cannon Soldier, a bunch of monsters on field to tribute for it. So I feel like we would have ultimately been fine. But, this is a very tricky interaction. I don't actually know if that's exactly how Barrel Behind the Door works. I think that's how it works. But it's a very weird card. And I'm sure that if people explore PGD format more, then more application of this card will come up, and maybe it will be revealed that this card isn't actually worth playing, despite it being good into a triple ring threat here. But only time will tell if people do decide to play this format further. And, I had a lot of fun playing it in these games here. So I encourage people to play it further. But yeah, that's going to be the match that I'm showing off here. And very, very fun games. I thought it was really cool that we were able to show off the Lava Golem Ring Barrel combo, even if it isn't the best. And I'm glad that I brought this deck into experimenting with this format, because I do think it's probably one of the more iconic things you can do in this format. But with that, we've sort of reached the end of our official Yata format coverage and Yata adjacent format coverages. Now we're going to be diving into a brand new format, which is tentatively called Breaker or Scientist or Mad Scientist or Science. We've still got polls up for those. Poll results are leaning towards Breaker, so if you feel strongly about Breaker versus Scientist or Mad Scientist or what have you on those names, then definitely get in there and vote and make your voice heard. Because I want to sort of have that format name be something that the community as a whole decides on, because, we're going to be the ones playing it. So I want to make sure that, everyone playing it has a say in what the name might be. But look forward to that. It should be a lot of fun. Magician's Force introduced a lot of crazy cards to the game, including one in particular that I'm very excited to dive into. So definitely stay tuned for that. Subscribing to the best way to be notified when those videos will come out, which hopefully they'll be coming out later this week, although the guide video is going to be very long. So, it will probably be out by the end of this week, but, it might be later in the week than you may be used to. But we just reached over 900 subscribers just last night, which is really awesome to see. We're so close to 1,000. Really awesome to see. I think we can reach it by the end of the year. So if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment down below saying what you thought of this format, and I'm sure we'll be able to reach the big 1K in no time at all. But I hope that you enjoyed this video as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.